Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Looks like
Okay.
as you're coming into the room, we're going to give everybody just another few minutes. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties on our side as we're working through a couple things. Yep, I see lots more people joining. Very good. Welcome, welcome. We are very excited to go over a great fun topic today, hiring hurdles. Yep. Welcome. Come on in. We are just letting everybody get situated. You are on webinar mode, so we cannot see or hear you. So feel free to eat your lunch as you're listening. Yeah, welcome. I see more and more people joining. Fantastic. That's great. All right, so let's do some housekeeping just as people are coming in. You guys know the drill with Zoom. You've got your chat. Feel free to chat with each other. Make comments if you want to. The only thing is that Shana and I will not be able to monitor the chat as we're talking. But Jenna, our lovely Jenna, is in the chat and can help you with some things. If there's questions you have that you want us to answer, we've got some Q&A time set up at the end. But please put those questions under the Q&A tab. So if you hover over your Zoom controls, you'll see the Q&A tab. I am pulling that up right this minute so I can keep my eye on that. If it looks like we've got some questions that are pertinent to the moment and what we're talking about in at that time, we'll try to pause and answer questions in real time. However, keep in mind that is a little bit difficult for us to do as we're in the middle of a conversation. So please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to those at the end if we are unable to do that in the moment. Yep, and I see some chat. Let's see. Jenna popped in the chat. Good to see you guys there. I will not have our chat open. So Jenna, if there's anything that needs to be done, please just unmute and jump in and let us know if there's anything going on in the chat we need to know about. It is 5 minutes after the hour. I think we should go ahead and get started. Shana, what do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is our webinar on navigating hiring hurdles. And we are recording this, so you will get a recording of this after the fact if you want to go back and reference anything. This is a great topic as we have a lawyer and an HR consultant on the webinar. So let's go over a little bit about what we're going to be talking about, and that's HR. Obviously, you've got your HR consultant with Shana, and some legal things with insights for small businesses. Just a little bit of background. If I don't know you yet, I hope to know you at some point. My name is Laurie Lee. I am a business attorney. I started this firm, the Legal Department for Service Professionals, almost 10 years ago, and it was set up specifically for small businesses. So that's under 20 employees. And we offer legal services to businesses that are service-based. So that is people who provide services which are heavily reliant upon humans to provide the services. So this is very important to our clients to understand how to manage, how to hire, and then how to protect yourself and your workers from all those issues. And then we have Shana Ryan. Shana, introduce yourself. Say hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on this webinar today. So we serve small businesses as well. We serve companies that have 99 employees or less, and we provide fractional outsourced HR support. So you don't need to hire someone full-time internally. It does not make sense for your business from a financial standpoint, but you definitely need HR expertise because doing all the HR things that are required to run a small business is just not what the owner should be doing. So we come in and make sure policies are written and compliance is maintained so you can run your business.
And I will say there is a lot of overlap in what Shana does with what an attorney does. But just to kind of get that taken care of right now, let's just be clear about what an attorney's role is on the legal side and then what HR compliance is. So HR compliance Shane is an expert in those legal rules and regulations about employees and independent contractors. She's studied that. She's got certifications. So HR consultants are incredibly important to businesses. For one, is that they are subject matter experts and they go down into the nitty gritty of the details, but they also help advise business owners on how to handle certain situations. Legal, well, we're more expensive. So attorneys have a higher rate. So it doesn't always make sense for small businesses to go straight to an attorney for some HR things that an HR um, compliance coordinator, officer, consultant can do. So we often recommend Shana and her company to a lot of our clients who have HR issues for that reason. And you get a lot more ability to talk with Shana and run some things by her, which I love. And also just a little plug, Shana is our HR consultant for our law firm, and has helped me personally through many HR things. And she's helped us actually write our employee policies, which we're going to talk about next. So, topic
Well, and to
number one.
your point, Laurie, there's definitely a stopping point that us as HR consultants will come to, which then we will rely on attorneys such as yourself, and you are our attorney, and you have put agreements in place for us. So definitely a lot of business together.
We love to form our own little community of small businesses and help each other and support each other. So,
Absolutely.
and hopefully we can share our knowledge and advice with you all today on this webinar. And hopefully you'll learn some good things on how to manage and grow your business. So let's talk about topic number one, employee policies versus employment agreements. So Shana, how do you feel about employee policies?
Employee policies are extremely important. They set the guidelines and the boundaries and the expectations for not only what you as a business owner expect from your employees, but vice versa, what you are going to provide as the employer for your employees. So, such as workplace safety, they should have a safe place to work. That is your job as the employer, whether it's a remote or an in-person facility, place of business, office, whatever the case may be. I like to call them the CYA policies. You expect your employees not to come to work drinking or doing drugs, and they expect to have a safe place to work. They expect equal opportunity, and those two things, even though they're expected, they really do need to be in writing and signed off, because we do say in HR, if it's not signed and not in writing, it never happened. So it's really important to have those simple yet extremely beneficial policies in place.
So would you say that the employee policies are basically just like restatements of the law? Like they just tell people what the rules are? Or is it more than that?
It's more than that, for sure. So there are some that are restatements of the law, absolutely, just to solidify that as an employer, you are following specific laws, but also to put in place, whether it's PTO or holidays, this is as a business how you're going to function, rather than piecemealing and having different things for different people without a structure behind it. That can lead to a potential lawsuit as far as discrimination goes.
Yeah. So there's lots of things I want to ask you about that. So
Yeah.
there's things where you just, basically put the law in there about the safety and the different things like that. But then there's things where the business owner has to choose, how do
Yeah.
you want to do this? Like how many paid days off do you want to give? How do you want to handle vacations? How do you want to handle paid holidays? Whatever that is, right? So the employer, you as a business owner, you're choosing these things and then you're putting them in there. What do you say if a business owner is like, well, you know what? I don't really want to put that in writing. I don't really want to put that like out there as like a rule. I want to have like flexibility for that.
So there's got to be some sort of guidelines, otherwise just don't touch it at all. That's basically your choices, because it will, and it can lead to a discrimination if you cannot prove that I did it for this person because of this and I did it for that person because of that, whether it's their level in the company, how long they've been with the company. There's many different ways to craft different policies. And in the state of Florida, there is no legal requirement that you have to give a certain amount of sick days or a certain amount of time off. As employers get to choose how they do that, but having a defined plan of how you do that is very, it really reduces that risk and almost
Mm.
makes it obsolete. So obviously, if an employee or employer wanted to do it that way, then that's their prerogative. I don't recommend it. It does leave that door wide open for risk.
So, for example, if, I fire somebody, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
any policies in place that say you get this and you get that. I fire somebody, they're mad at me. They
Mm-hmm.
come and say that I discriminated against them. And one of the things they're saying I discriminated is because I didn't let them have any paid time off, but I let somebody else have all this paid time off. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying is that can be
Yes.
used as evidence that you discriminated against somebody because you didn't have like a set standard.
Correct. If you can't prove that you didn't, then it leaves it open for determination that you might have. And at the end of the day, a lot of these companies settle out of court, and 5, 10 grand to a small business can be detrimental.
That
So
hurts.
that's what we want to avoid is even it getting to that point to say, no, we have it in writing. And to your point of the end of life with employees that you're terminating them, you really want to make sure if you don't want to pay it out to have in writing, we do not pay out any unused PTO or sick time. That's
Mm.
extremely important as well. Or you can tier it out by tenure or where they are in the company. Again, there's different ways to craft that policy, but you really want to have those things in writing. Because if you did it in the past for someone and then you don't do it for someone else, and then that that relationship ends sideways, that's where the waters can get muddy and get expensive.
Yeah, I think a lot of times as small business owners, everyone's wanting to learn how to do things. And obviously that's why, we all take these
Mm-hmm.
webinars and we're learning. And sometimes we think, well, that doesn't sound too complicated. I think I'll just put this in writing myself. I don't
Yeah.
need to go hire anybody to help me. I'm just going to say you get this many hours and paid time off. But the thing you just said right there about what happens when you fire them or they quit and then they come back and demand to be paid for the time that they didn't take off, that they should have been
Mm-hmm.
paid for, like those are the things that you don't know as a small
Right.
business owner that could come back and bite you in the behind because
Right.
that's where the $5,000 here, the $10,000 there, that can really hurt you. So there are some small little detail things that really hurt. Like I have a mentor that says, small hinges swing big doors. So, little details can really hurt if you're not
Yeah.
paying attention. So that's the benefit of having an expert, that you can call and talk to, like you.
Absolutely.
So that's why you wrote our employee policies, because even though I'm an attorney and I'm a business attorney and I've studied all these laws and things, it's hard for me to have two hats on at the same time. And so having you have an extra set of eyes on them to make sure I'm doing them was right was huge for me.
Well, and having a third party too, because we want to be nice and we develop relationships with our people. And there is nothing wrong with that, creating a great culture. But sometimes it gets a little hard to differentiate the what's best for the business and what's best for employees. And you can always add to it. It's not like you make it and it's set in stone and this is how we have to do it for the life of the business. But we always recommend to start out small with doing any type of these PTO plans and things like that. And you can always add more if you
Mm.
feel later down the road that that's where you are in the business and what you want to do. So, but it's good to have that third party come in with a completely different outlook on things and has seen where things have gone the wrong way to help prevent that.
So if somebody is getting ready to hire their first employee, would it be your recommendation that they go ahead and have these employee policies in place before they make their first hire?
I think it's a good idea. Yes, I definitely do. Have something, even if it's super small. It's important to employees and it's a good onboarding and retention. You even though you're a small business and starting out, you want to your employees to know that you have thought about them, not just the business, and put some time and effort into them and what they're going to get.
So that's a great topic about, and that is having the balance. It's
Mhm.
I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. It's not just all like dictating to the employee, here's what you have to do, and there's nothing in there about what I have to do as the employer. So having
Right.
that balance kind of sets what you kind of like the culture. But what if somebody already has like 4 or 5 employees and they don't have any policies in place? How does somebody put employee policies in place?
I always tell companies when they're working with us, just blame it on HR. Half the time, employees don't really care for HR anyway. It just comes with, or like the principal's office. So even though I don't think we're too bad, but we just, it's a very easy segue to say we've hired an HR consultant. Here's what they recommend. Here's what we're going to do, and we will have the conversations with employees if we need to. But out of the several small businesses that we've helped who really have not seen that kind of issue. So it's all in how you lay it up. So we're going to put this together so you will know exactly what's going on and paint that picture because it really is. It's not only to help the business owner, but it is to help the employees. So to make sure that those jive together.
But the employee doesn't have to agree. It's the business owner's decision, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not like you have to get agreement. I mean, you want to get buy-in. You don't want there to be culture issues, but ultimately the employer decides what the policies are going to be and you just put them in place, right?
Right. And it really just goes into how you communicate it with your employees.
Yeah. And then what if you want to change them? I know a lot of people I've talked to are like, I get so wrapped up around this. I get wrapped around the axle. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to lock myself into something. Like, what if they want to change it?
New Year is a great time to change things and identify why you want to change it. Is it the employees have issues? Is it problems tracking it? I know we're pigeonholed in the right now and really talking about the PTO, but whatever the policy is, why, figure out the true why behind it and dive into that. You can change them at any time, but I think a great time is the beginning of the year and you can communicate towards the end of the year, November, December, hey, we're going to make some changes. These are coming out, rolling out in January. So be on the lookout for them.
And then do you have the employees sign them? Like,
Oh, yeah.
is it an agreement?
It is not necessarily a legal agreement, but it is an agreement saying that they have read it and understand it is more what it is.
It's like a receipt. I acknowledge that I
Yeah,
have this. It is my
precisely.
job to read them and know them.
Right. And to
Um,
follow,
but it's not a contract.
yeah,
So let's transition into then employment contracts, employment
yeah.
agreements, because this is really where fine line distinctions tend to matter. So
Mhm.
we've talked a lot about, and you've mentioned some topics that go into employee policies. I would imagine there might be like some things like dress code and like,
Mhm.
how you behave on the job and all those different things.
Right.
So in my world, employment agreements, Florida is an at-will state, right? Which means what?
It means that you can terminate someone at any time as
That's
long as
right.
it's for legal or it's not illegal, a protected class. That's what I'm looking
Right. So protected class would be somebody that, that's when you have like anti-discrimination, all those things that people sue over, right?
for. Right.
So if someone's just not performing, or if you need to lay somebody off for financial reasons, Florida's not restrictive on that.
Correct.
However, if somebody has an employment agreement, there are two types of employment agreements in Florida. There's the kind that keep the at-will status in place, which means you can terminate whatever you want. And then there's what's called employment for a term. Employment for a term are employment contracts usually given for like executives, who have this like package that says we promise to employ you for 4 years, or we promise to employ you for 2 years. And if we let you go before the end of that term, then we'll pay you a severance and we'll pay you all this other stuff, right? So most of the time, small businesses don't use those types of agreements because their employment for a term is a promise to employ someone for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the agreements that we recommend for small businesses are the at-will employment agreements that keep that at-will status.
Yep.
So the question sometimes comes like, why would you even need an employment agreement? Why don't you just rely on employee policies?
Because what are you asking?
If you want to jump in on that one, if not, I can answer it.
Well, there's a lot of things in the employment agreement that protect the business, and that's where you're leading with it. So I'll let you
Yeah.
take the lead on that. But that's
Yeah. So, and one of them is the fact that the employee policies, like I said, it's not a contract. Like you said, they acknowledge receipt of the policies, but it's not a binding contract. They are not agreeing to do those things. They're just
Mhm.
saying, I've received it and I know it's my responsibility to read it. An employment agreement is they sign and it's a binding contract. They are agreeing to do it. So, what kinds of things would you really want them to be held to the fire on? Like, well, confidentiality is one of them. That's a huge one, especially for service-based businesses. Like, and in today's online social media world, confidentiality is huge, even for small businesses that don't deal with medical or legal or finances, even, businesses that all different kinds have confidentiality issues.
Mhm.
So confidentiality has to be in an employment contract that's a legally binding contract. Some other things that people like to put in there or think that it's necessary to protect the business is non-solicitation. In other words, when you leave here, you're not going to go solicit our clients, our customers. You're
Definitely.
not going to, for your next employer or for yourself, if you just want to start up your own business, like you can't just go talk to our people or poach our employees or talk to our referral sources or our vendors or
Mhm.
um, another one might be non-disparagement. You can't go badmouth us, in
Yeah.
person or online,
Right.
which is a
Reputation.
little bit of an overlap with policies, right? Because while they're employed with you, you have something in the employee policies about social media content and posting, and
Right.
that's during the employment. But
Right.
employment agreements cover while they're employed and after the fact. So it
Mhm.
continues after they leave you. They are still obligated for non-disparagement, confidentiality, non-solicitation, and possibly a non-compete if it's appropriate and justified in your business. So the difference mainly here is that employee policies, the employer gets to say, this is what you need to do,
Yep.
and the employee doesn't have to agree to them. They just have to follow them. And a lot of times when there's a issue with an employee, you can use the employee policies to say, look, they didn't follow them. This is evidence that they didn't do their job or they didn't follow
Right.
the company's policies. Whereas an employment agreement as a legally binding contract, that's where they are legally required to behave in a certain way. And you can enforce that even after they leave your employment. All right. So I love this topic. I think we could talk the entire hour on this
We
topic.
could.
But let's go ahead and flip to our next one, which is worker classifications. And by the way, I forgot to say this. If this is huge on your screen, there's a little line between our faces and this slide that you can grab it and resize either side. So if you want to see our faces bigger and this slide smaller, just grab that line on Zoom and drag it. All right, Shana, what do you think is the biggest issue with worker classifications?
I have heard this from small business owners, and I quote, "Well, I'm a small business, so it doesn't matter." And I think that's the philosophy sometimes, a lot of times, which is not true. If you have one employee, you have laws that you have to follow. And you can't just call someone an independent contractor so you don't have to pay them as an employee. That's not how it works. So there are differences between employees and independent contractors. Obviously, they're taxed differently. So I I always say that the government's not getting as much money with an independent contractor, so they're just going to have more rules on employees. and independent contractors. And they're going to dive into that because they're not getting their payroll taxes. So they're not getting their half of their Social Security and Medicare. They're not getting the federal income tax. They're not getting their state income or the, not federal income tax, I'm sorry, unemployment, the SUDA and the SUDA, which is the state unemployment tax. So right off the gate, there's four things that they're missing out on as far as revenue goes. So they're going to have a lot to say about it.
Mm.
So the difference between employees and independent contractors are really how hands-on you are with the person. So you bring a person in, if they're truly an expert in the field, you can basically just send them on their way. I use the plumber analogy. You hire a plumber, your plumber comes to your door, you show them your sink, and you walk away. Yes, you agree on the time. Yes, you agree on a rate. But other than that, they have the expertise. They come in with their tools and they fixed your sink. So you're not supplying them their tools. You're not giving them wrenches and hammers or whatever they need to do their plumber thing. And you're not telling them step by step what to do. You're not hovering over them, I hope, telling them how to do their job. You know, they're coming in to provide you a service because they know what they're doing and how to do it, and you don't. Same concept in your business. So extremely different and extremely important to know whether or not you're employing an independent contractor or an employee. Because again, in this game of small business, it gets expensive if you do it wrong. And
Right.
that's what we're trying to help everyone avoid.
Yeah. So when we say worker classifications, that's what we're talking about, guys.
Yeah.
We're talking about, are you going to classify them as an employee or do you classify them as an independent contractor? And, you know, it's not a fine line. It's really like a big gray road, and you got to figure out which side of the road you got to be on. And, you know, employee is the safest classification because the IRS is going to get their taxes, the state revenue is going to get their taxes,
Mhm.
and the worker, the law is going to be okay because the worker is going to be protected from all the laws that they're being passed to protect workers.
Right.
So no one's going to argue with you if you classify someone as an employee, but people don't like it. Small business owners don't like it because you have to set up payroll, you have to withhold taxes, you then have to pass those taxes on to the government, and then you're liable if you get it wrong, and you have to give them all these other employee protections that are overwhelming sometimes for small businesses. So people
Mm-hmm.
tend to think, you know what? I just want to make this easy. You're going to be an independent contractor. I'm just going to cut you a check. I owe you nothing, no protections, no nothing. I'm just giving you a check. You take care of everything else. And
Right.
that's where small businesses get in trouble because they're taking the easy way out without doing the analysis. So if just by calling them an independent contractor gets you out of all the requirements, then that's where you're going to end up with a big penalty at the end. Because what's going to happen is, you hire somebody as an independent contractor, for example. I know you've seen this. I've seen this too. You hire a business owner hires somebody and they say, you know what, we're just going to be an independent contractor. And the worker's like, yeah, I'm good. I just want to be an independent contractor. Just give me my check. And so you cut him a check. And maybe a year later, I don't know, however long later, you fire them or you terminate them or you tell them that you don't have any more work for them. And what are they going to do? They're going to turn around and file for unemployment. And what's going to happen then? Shana, what happens when they file for unemployment?
Then you're going to write back and say, well, they were an independent contractor, not an employee. And then the state's going to wonder why. And it can turn into a fiasco that you want nothing to do with because then they're going to audit.
Yep, the state's going to send you this big long questionnaire about, did you do this? Did you do that? How was this set up? How was that set up? And, you're going to have to fill that out. And then when you send it back, if the state says, no, this was actually an employee, you should have hired them as an employee, then what's going to happen is they're going to communicate to the IRS and the US Department of Labor, because they all have this interagency compact with each other where they share information. And in addition, the state of Florida is now going to come back to you as a business owner and say, you know what, you should have been paying into our unemployment fund to fund these claims. You weren't paying into it. So now you got to go back and pay in everything you should have been paying, and we're going to assess you a penalty. And then the IRS is going to come in and be like, wait a minute, you should have been submitting taxes for these people. So even though were assuming that the independent contractor is going to pay their taxes, the IRS is still going to come to you and be like, nope, sorry, you really have to pay the taxes for them because you should have been withholding. So you're going to now pay even more money because you can't go back to the independent contractor and yank that money back. So
Right.
now it's going to come out of your pocket. You're going to have to send that to the IRS. So the penalties and fines add up very quickly. So
Right.
it's a lot riskier to hire somebody and classify them as an independent contractor. So how do you do this? It's really analysis. Like I said, there's no black or white thing that says, oh, well, if they do this, if they have their own LLC, then that automatically means they're an independent contractor. Or they're just part-time, so they're automatically an independent contractor. Or I pay them by the project, or they work from home, or all those things do not mean anything. And what you actually have to do is you have to do what I call a factor test. And you have to say, here's my little hands, right? So this is a scale, you know. So I say, okay, well, do I have to train them? That goes on the employee side. But you know what? They come with their own plumber tools, their own computers and whatever. That goes on the independent contractor side. How do you pay them? I pay them by the hour. That goes on the employee side, or I pay them on by the project. That so you see, you put each factor, each detail of how that situation is arranged goes on that side of the scale. And then when you're done, you say which side has more stuff on it. Well, I got more check marks on the employee side. You better classify that one as an employee. Or I have a lot of check marks on the independent contractor side. I think I can get away with putting them as an independent contractor. You save this analysis, this check mark thing, and you put it in their file. And if ever you're challenged on that later, you pull it back out and you're like, hey, here's why I classified them as an independent contractor. No matter what they say, here's why I did it. And we have an independent contractor agreement. And they agreed that they don't get unemployment, and they agree they don't get workers' comp, and they all this other stuff. So it's not as easy as people think to do an independent contractor, because you still have to CYA, you still have to have all this stuff in place.
Correct.
But on an ongoing basis, it does get easier for an independent contractor once you get over that hump, as long as you're not changing up the relationship. So I like the example of, like, we're a law firm, right? So I've had paralegals for the past 10 years. Some of our paralegals we've hired as independent contractors, and some of them we have hired as employees. It is not the position that dictates how the classification goes. It is the human and how you structure that relationship. That's what it is do I have to train my paralegal, or is she experienced? Does she come with her own stuff, or do I have to give her stuff? Like, all of these things go into that classification analysis.
Absolutely.
So even with an independent contractor, let's tie this back to policies. Can you have policies for independent contractors?
You can have, to a degree, yes. I recommend just a code of conduct. If it's a delivery driver, you don't want them driving up to customer properties with their music blaring and a cigarette hanging out of their mouth. Like, you can have specific standards of conduct and appearance and things of that nature, but I really wouldn't go any further than that.
Like, you can say, like, when when you greet somebody, make sure you say, I'm here because I'm here on behalf of so and so. Or
Yeah.
internal processes for submitting whatever that might be, time invoices, which,
Right.
by the
So if you're
way,
going to pay them monthly, it's due by the 20th,
right,
whatever they've been working on, things like that. Yeah.
but they don't get paid time off.
No,
They don't get paid vacations.
no.
They don't get any of those
Holidays,
things.
none
Nothing.
of that.
And they typically don't get reimbursed for their business expenses.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
They can get reimbursed for materials that go to the client. So for example, if they're spending money on supplies that then gets turned over to a client, and the client,
Like a salesperson.
yeah, right.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So I think those are tricky things that you all need to be definitely be aware of. And running that by Shana or me or somebody like us to kind of help you make sure you got that justified. Also tying independent contractors back to our previous conversation, not just on policies, but on a contract. The independent contractor agreement is probably even more important than an employment agreement. And for the reasons that you don't have any kind of policies that they're required, there's no binding anything on that. How do you pay them? This is all evidence, that can support your decision to classify them as independent contractors. And the fact that they signed off on it and it says, I know I'm an independent contractor. I know I'm not an employee. I know I have to pay my own taxes. I know I don't get all these benefits. Then you don't have any issues then later if they try to file for unemployment. And all you have to do is pull out the contract and be like, well, hey, they just said like they knew they didn't get to file for unemployment and they did it anyway. And by the way, here's my justification for classifying them as an independent contractor. I mean, that's the easiest way to get out of an FDOR questionnaire when that might happen.
Absolutely.
Even more
And I've seen
important.
a couple other ways just doing this for so many years now where employers actually got caught doing this. So there could be a child support garnishment that they get sent because then the contractor put themselves down as a true employee, and then you get a garnishment from a state saying, "Hey, you've got to take out X amount for child support," or an IRS garnishment. Also, if maybe they haven't paid in their taxes and that's why they want to be an independent contractor. I've seen that. And I've also seen where they get hurt on a job and they go in and want workers' comp to cover them and they're not covered under workers' comp. And that it's just a matter of that string getting pulled and that unraveling started because, as you mentioned, they are intertwined. So if one department puts in a case, then the other departments get lit up and you just get inundated.
Yeah. And I've even seen like family businesses like that have hired a family member for as an independent contractor, and that person got hurt and they had no other way to pay their medical bills. Like
Wow.
they didn't have health insurance. They had, the only way they had to pay their medical bills was to file a workers' comp claim, which triggered the whole business unraveling,
Mm-hmm.
like you're talking about. So that definitely happens. I mean, you do think, oh, well, this person wouldn't do this to me. This person understands. Well, that was a family member. So, people do what they need to do in the
Yeah.
situations that they're in. Um, the other thing I was going to say, even more important is the confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
It's the non-solicitation, the don't mess with my clients after the fact. But it also could even be intellectual property because if an independent contractor creates intellectual property for you, so like a lot of our clients are marketing firms and they hire independent contractors all day long. And those independent contractors are creating logos and creating websites. Well, guess who owns that stuff? The human that creates it owns it. So
Yeah.
your
Good
independent
point.
contractor owns that stuff, and that independent contractor agreement then has to serve as an ownership transfer. And it has to have all the magic language in there that transfers ownership of intellectual property to the business that's hiring them. Otherwise, it stays with the independent contractor. And I've even seen where, like, independent contractor goes back to the client and demands to be paid because they said that the business, the marketing agency, didn't pay them. I mean, that would be embarrassing. So um, you don't want to be in those situations. So
There you go.
there's definitely some contractual issues that become a lot more important when it comes to independent contractors. I do see a question here on topic. She says, if my employee is a W-2 and they use their own vehicle for going to each job site and we agree on an hourly rate to be paid, am I required to also include mileage reimbursement on top of that?
I don't think you're required to do mileage on top of it.
I think it's going to depend on how you've got your wording structured.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some onboarding stuff next. I think that's going to be an onboarding thing. And if you have an hourly rate that says this includes all mileage, or, you know, it could be that mileage gets reimbursed, but it's a business expense for you as well,
Mhm.
because then you would be able to deduct that as a travel expense. On top of that. So I think it's going to be how you structure that, but it wouldn't be something like you pay gas. Now this is a CPA thing too, right? So we're talking tax, a little bit of overlap.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the mileage or actual expenses like gas and if it's a car rental or whatever that. So talk to your CPA and see how that would count, but you wouldn't pay both. That's the thing. You wouldn't give them like a
True.
gas card and then also pay mileage.
But also, whatever you decide in this and however it is structured needs to be consistent with all employees that are in that position too, because that can go back to the discrimination and why did this person get it but I didn't. So make sure
Mhm.
too when setting this up, if you're going to have more employees in this role, that is consistent.
Yeah, good point. Excellent. All right, let's jump into our last topic, which is onboarding and offboarding. Um, Different for employees and independent contractors. A lot more for employees. So let's tackle that first. So what do you say for somebody who's onboarding an employee? How should they start looking at this process if they've never done it before?
The onboarding is the very first taste of what your, and we'll stick with employees right now, but it's going to be the very first taste of what the employee gets from your company. So the more streamlined that is, the better, obviously. Now you got to make sure you have your current W-4 and you've got to make sure you have the updated I-9, which the was just redone. So make sure you have the current one.
Where do they get those?
You can get those from the Department of Homeland Security website. You can just type 2024 I-9 form in your Google search bar and it'll take you to a PDF.
Yeah.
So want to make sure those are filled out correctly too. You can be fined if you get an I-9 audit per item that is incorrect on a form. So that can add up real quickly. You need to make sure to see the either list A, which is typically a passport, list B and C. Generally speaking, there's a lot of different documents, but the most common are your driver's license and social security. You need to see it, hold it, look at it in person, and then document it on the sheet. You don't need to keep copies of them, but if you do, make sure you keep copies for everybody. Don't just have one or two copies of IDs speckled in.
Yeah, but what about remote people? How do those businesses handle that?
You can have a notary. You can have them go to a notary or an authorized representative of the company.
Okay, so no more of this showing on the screen. This is how we do it during
Unless you're
COVID stuff.
unless you're set up for E-Verify and you have to be, I believe, at the beginning of the year set up for E-Verify. So if you have E-Verify set up, you can do it with showing it online.
Is that hard for small businesses who hire remotely? Is it hard to do?
To set up E-Verify? Or
Or just to do this I-9 thing? Are you finding that that's a harder thing now?
it can be tricky. It was actually nice. One of the silver linings of COVID was being able to do things in a more remote fashion. So it can be a little trickier. Yeah,
So they've stopped that now.
they have completely is without the E-Verify piece. Yeah, that's completely, you have to either have an authorized representative for the company and then someone that you can authorize. It can't be a family member or something like that, but you can have someone be an authorized representative, or you can just go to a bank and have a notary do it, and they can count as your authorized representative.
And they would notarize the I-9.
Yes. Well, they'll fill it out on behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's ways that the small businesses can get around the remote issues. Okay. Okay. So we got the I-9. What next?
This goes back into your policies. What policies do you have in place? So even if you're hiring your first person, you want to have some sort of defined policies and procedures on internally. And then what are they going to be doing? And this is, I'm guilty of this, being a small business owner myself, hiring someone, wanting them to do one thing, and then in small business, you do all the things, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're really good at this. Let's give you that too, and this too. And so having that defined job description, and yes, in some ways you want to ebb and flow and put people where they gravitate towards and what they're good at, but on the same standpoint, having where they know what's expected of them, and that can be a big hurdle for us small business owners too, because we're just going so fast and want all the things done. So really
Mhm.
taking that time out before you're actually onboarding to define what they're going to be doing and what the expectations are in that role, and then having really good internal documentation so they know where to go and how to drive what you're wanting them to do and be
Like
successful
procedures
for.
manual kind of thing, like step by
Yeah.
step how to do it. Yeah. So I'm thinking of like an example I can use myself. Like, I had a really great paralegal who loved spreadsheets and was good with numbers.
Mhm.
So I actually taught her how to do our trust accounting. Law firm trust accounts are pretty big
Yeah.
deals. She did our trust accounting, but that's not really typically a paralegal function, but she kind of worked her way into that.
Mhm.
And, we just kind of emailed back and forth. You comfortable doing this? Yes, I am. This is now we're going to do it. You're going to do it on Thursdays. And here's the process step by step.
Yeah.
Is something like that you think enough?
I think so. I think it needs to be mutually agreed upon, and as you start working with the person, you're going to see that they're really good in this area, and to build on that, I'm a firm believer in building, not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So if someone's really good at something else that maybe wasn't on your radar at the time, but it's something that needs to be done and will benefit the business, then absolutely you
Yeah.
can move
So you're
them.
not saying keep somebody in the very first position that you hire them in. You
Not
can do
necessarily.
this. Yeah.
Not necessarily, unless this is only what is necessary for the business. It needs to coincide with business needs for sure.
So, okay. So they've got the business type stuff. Did we
Mhm.
cover all of the government filings? We covered the W.
So you'll need the W-4, which is what
Mhm.
employees fill out for their taxes, and you'll have to plug that into payroll. If you, depending on your payroll software, if they set up their own profile where they put in their direct deposit information, things of that nature, if you all supply that, then, or having a direct deposit form, I highly recommend um, sorry, my words. I highly recommend emergency contact form, because things happen in life, and if you need to get a hold of an emergency contact, and even that includes things like allergies. If they're highly allergic to something and you don't know, if it's a peanut allergy and someone brings in
Mm,
peanut butter cookies, you just need to have some sort of idea of what's going on with your people right off the
yeah.
bat. That
The
can really.
one thing that I constantly have to remind myself of is the Florida new hire reporting form.
Yeah.
So, and that's a weird one because it's not where you think it's going to be. It's actually with like child support and, um, so
And that's
it's
exactly what it's for. Yeah, it's for the child support.
yeah, yeah. So it's not where you think it is, and so you do that. Florida wants to know when you do a new hire, so you fill out this form for employees, but then they also extended it to independent contractors because independent contractors also owe child support. So so you got to do it for both. Yeah, and then the other thing that I consistently tend to forget to do is if I'm giving like equipment to people, like if
Yeah,
they get a cell phone or if I'm giving them a laptop and they can take it home and like keeping track of all that. So what's your recommendation there?
a computer issuance agreement or any type of company issuance agreement. We did the same thing. We issue a laptop, we issue a separate monitor, sometimes hotspot, because we cannot use public Wi-Fi. So any of those are documented with the serial number, the amount that it's worth, and their signature saying that they received it. They're going to keep it in good condition.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, good point. Basically, by public Wi-Fi, that should be in the policies, right? No
mhm.
sitting in the coffee shop, logging in, doing work
Right.
stuff on their Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
That
depending
ever.
on what industry you're in, that's something to be really mindful of, because it takes a good hacker just a few seconds, which is
Yeah.
scary.
As a business owner, I would not I would not allow any of my employees to do that ever, regardless of
Right.
industry, because that's a way into your system, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So Anything else for onboarding? We can cover offboarding real quick.
Not that I can think of. I just want to point out that a lot of you need to check with your payroll software on the Florida new hire reporting. Some softwares do it for you automatically, some don't, and those that don't, then obviously you do need to take care of that on your own.
Okay, good point. So, yeah, so speaking of payroll and getting it set up on payroll, like I know some of our clients do payroll themselves. I know sometimes their CPAs do it. I know sometimes they have like ADP or Paychecks, or you
Mm-hmm.
guys do payroll.
Yep,
So no matter what system a small business does, really being involved and understanding what is going on with payroll is really the business owner's responsibility, ultimately.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
checking, a big one that I've seen is checking to make sure your reports get filed. So sometimes system glitches happen. It's not like the software is maliciously doing it, but things happen with software. So a good rule of thumb is every quarter to log in to make sure that those reports actually were disseminated to the state and the proper filing authorities, because if something happens, it's not on that payroll software, it's on you, and you get the fines and the penalties for that.
And where would they log in to check that?
Under their reports, tax report, all they're all set up a little bit differently, but you should be able to whatever, whether it's ADP, Gusto, Paychex, whatever,
So within
log
the
into your
software,
software, log into your report to see your tax filing. There should be
gotcha.
copies of all those.
Okay, excellent. All right. So offboarding, a little
Yes.
bit different for independent contractors and employees. So let's tackle employees first.
Okay.
Offboarding, what do you say to people when they're, first of all, how do you have that conversation and what should you be doing?
Well, they're all a little different. Less is more when talking with someone. So hopefully you've done your documentation. I'm assuming if it's not not someone leaving for their better opportunities. So maybe you've had some issues with them and you need to part ways. Definitely want to make sure you have documentation. Even in your 90-day probationary period, it's good to have documentation. And then make sure, as you mentioned, any equipment, you want to get those back, make arrangements, whether it's sending a mailing label to them so they can ship it back, getting any keys, whatever they have, and then reminding them of the employment agreement that they signed. So it's always a good idea to go back through that to say, hey, just a heads up, you can't reach out to any of our employees, you can't reach out to any of our vendors, this is our property. If there's a non-compete in there, what that time frame is, what that looks like, just to give them a reminder that you're not forgetting about this, and neither should they.
Excellent point. And that none of that is binding when it's in the policies. It's only binding when it's in an employment
Correct.
agreement. So when you're offboarding, you send them a copy of this saying, hey, remember you signed this. This is
Yep.
your obligation. Same thing for independent contractors, by the way. I recommend is send them that signed independent contractor agreement saying, just a reminder, here's a copy. Want to make sure you have this for your files. And by the way, you've agreed that these things are not going to happen.
Yep.
So um, all good things. Any reporting that needs to be done to any government agencies when you terminate someone?
If they have child support set up, it's a good idea. And then to move their I-9, so I didn't really touch on this, but quick I-9 tutorial, you want to make sure you have active and terminated I-9 separate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. All right, guys. Well, that gives you enough going on there. We have no questions in the Q&A, but if you have any, please jump in there now. We've got 4 minutes left in the webinar. We will jump over and answer any that you have. In the meantime, Shana and I have 2 free resources for you. Shana's got some policies. She calls them CYA. You tell them about that, Shana.
it's the cover your behind policies. So, how I mentioned, don't come to work drinking or doing drugs, workplace safety, and equal opportunity, anti-discrimination. Those policies are extremely important. They're a basic. You have one employee. We recommend right out the gate having these policies in place.
Absolutely. So this is a list of those types of policies we
Yes,
recommend
exactly.
people have as like the bare minimum. Okay.
Yes.
Great. So the QR code on the right is from us. That's the legal, and this is the scales that I was telling you about on how to classify an independent contractor versus an employee. This will help you make that determination. So if you want those handouts, please grab those QR codes there. I'll give you just another second before switching over to the next screen. We've got a couple of other resources. Jenna also dropped the links into the chat for both of those handouts. Looks like she also put the link to the new I-9 form because Jenna is just that good. Thank you,
Thank
Jenna.
you.
All right, switching to the next one. Here is Shana, you've got something new going on, which I love this.
Yes, so we have our DIY HR is what we're calling it. So maybe you just need a policy or two and just want to go ahead and do a quick download. And they are there. You can customize anything that is listed for your business, and you'll have that link. And then obviously you know how to find us if you've got any questions or need any help further with them.
Fantastic. I love this, making it as simple as possible for small businesses to get the
Mm-hmm.
resources that they need. Fantastic. For us at the legal department, what we're doing now is we are doing legal workshops for creating those employment agreements or creating those independent contractor agreements. And we're doing it in a workshop way. So it's a collaborative, instead of just, paying an attorney to go off and write this, we do the process together. So it is a little bit of a way to have a reduced legal fee for it, but you are participating in the process. You're learning a lot from it. I conduct the workshop. We go through all the different options, and then we draft the contract. So they're both happening on March 6th. At 10:30, we're doing employment agreements. But if you prefer to do an independent contractor agreement, you can do either one at 2:30 on the same day. So there is limited seats, so we can get to everybody. But this is our way of trying to get accessible legal contracts, good contracts that you need to have into the hands of small business owners. So there is the promo code for that. And Jenna has dropped both of those promos into our chat. And then we just have all kinds of social media. Shana and I both do newsletters on a monthly basis. And we post all kinds of legal and HR tips on social. So please follow us there. Let me see if we've got any other questions that popped in the meantime. I-9 form, is this something included when I have employees docs from QuickBooks if they do it themselves?
I don't believe QuickBooks does this, but I can't remember 100%. It's been a long time since I've worked with QuickBooks. The last
I
time I did, they did not do this.
We work with QuickBooks, and if they've put this in here, it's not in my version of QuickBooks. I've never seen an I-9. I think that's because the human has to see it. So human eyes have to do it. I don't think that's something that can be automated. But if QuickBooks has this new thing that's rolled out, I don't know about it. So I think our answer on that one is no, but good question. All right, so there's our socials, and thank you all so much for joining us. We are right at the top of the hour. Like I said, we will send out this recording to everybody who registered. Thank you again for joining us. It was great to see all of you on the participants list here, and we hope you learned a lot from it. If you don't mind, before you take off today, if you just want to jump in the chat and just let us know so we can understand if this was beneficial for you. Just like yep, this was great, learned a lot, or nope, already knew all this stuff. That would be helpful for us in the chat if you don't mind. We'll hang here and chat for just a minute, Shana, so they can grab those links if they need it. And we can go ahead and turn off the recording. And we'll just hang here for a minute and see,
Okay.
see how the chat comes in. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. All right, looks like we're all set. Thank you, Shana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
All right, bye.
Bye.